Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in the much coveted right after lunch speaker position. The deal I will make with you is that I promise not to take a nap if you won't either. The theme of this talk is the intelligent future of KPIs. We're going to talk about machine learning to optimize key performance. This is my most important slide. The content of the audience is more important than the content of the talk. I have near perfect knowledge of what I'm about to say this afternoon. I'm much more interested in how relevant and useful it is to you, so I look forward to getting your feedback and questions and comments through Pigeonhole. What's the big idea underlying this? The big idea is, with apologies to John Williams and several others of the speakers you've heard today, cost-effective digital transformation is more measurement-driven than data-driven. Don't confuse, don't conflate how you measure with data. And Lord knows, don't confuse data with measurement. We'll go into greater details on that in a moment. Basically, what digital transformation enables and drives is new ways to perform measurements and new ways of measuring performance. I've put the yin-yang mandala here because this creates a virtuous cycle of opportunity. The way we change how we perform measurements changes the kind of way performances we wish to measure. So the top-line research agenda that I help oversee, and I have colleagues David Chiron and Allison Ryder here from the Sloan Management Review, who are wonderful collaborators and colleagues on this initiative, the Strategic Measurement Initiative at Sloan, is first and foremost, digital transformation means the transformation of KPIs. KPIs are becoming smarter. How should KPIs learn from you, the world, and each other? The second, for those of you who like the Norton-Kaplan balanced scorecard notion, KPIs represent far more than just scorecards. They're more than just a way of keeping score. KPIs in a digital environment should be organizing principles for competitive advantage. And the third takeaway is going meta. That as KPIs become more important, the KPIs for KPIs, how we mediate, arbitrate, negotiate, and oversee conflicts and trade-offs between KPI coalitions and KPI portfolios, that's going to become key for business unit leaders and boards and all manner of innovators. This talk draws upon, I just mentioned David a moment ago, draws from published research, Strategy for and with AI, holds up very well, rather widely cited piece. This one was in collaboration with some folks from Deloitte who sort of opened the kimono with some of the customers and clients, and we used some of the themes that we had discussed about digital transformation being not just a means to an end, but as a way of rethinking how we want to measure desirable inputs and outputs. But the overarching theme and thesis of this talk that everybody in this room should be concerned about is, in a digitally transforming organization, how do you get measurably greater value from measurement? What do we mean by key? What do we mean by performance? What are the indicators? I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I just want to point out that there are legacy definitions, there are legacy notions of key performance indicators. Your organization may have a different flavor of definition. My point is, these legacy definitions are being transformed by the digital capabilities you've been hearing described this morning by John Williams, the gentleman who talked about flexible automation, and of course the startup talks. These are the drivers. Everything is being instrumented differently. Everything is being digitized. There are new genres of accessible AI, machine learning, and algorithmics. And of course, these things are all being networked together. These are structural changes that qualitatively and quantitatively change not just the data we gather, but the way we choose to measure what matters. Tell you a brief true story. Working with an organization that has made CLV, customer lifetime value, a core KPI for themselves. And they're using a variant, of course, on RFM, recency, frequency, monetary value for their clients. They did serious diagnostic analysis as to how deals closed. What did they discover? They discovered that there was a perfect correlation. Not just correlation, one could even say causality between companies in the pipeline that got references from existing users. That these existing users, once they gave a reference and spoke to a company in the pipeline, the deal closed. Here's the debate. I'm not going to tell you what the details were, but I will tell you I enjoyed the debate immensely. Do we change how we measure the customer lifetime value of those reference clients? In a marketing attribution, there wasn't unanimity about this. Because why? There's a difference between attribution and monetization. So there was a debate within the organization, do we consider customer lifetime value to be the same thing as customer lifetime monetization? These are not subtle questions. These questions determine how you analyze the value, what you invest, and how you service your key customers and clients. This is in a B2B environment, but trust me, it also works in the B2C environment as well. There's also the other obvious, again, true story, is what you're not measuring getting in the way of what you really want to understand. I like this example from Schwab earlier this year. Again, I don't need to read this to you, but I'm going to call it a revolution. Yes, they're emphasizing data on this, but only a couple of years ago did they decide to have customer effort score be part of customer experience assessment. So it's not, was it a good experience? How hard was it for you to get the value from this? And as you can see from reading this elongated quote, turns out they were and this is an NPS-oriented organization in terms of KPIs. Turns out there were very interesting correlations between customer effort and detractors and promoters. How can this not influence the way we choose to onboard, support, and work with customers and clients? But now let's stretch this out. It's not just a KPI, they're KPI portfolios. What if, here's the Gedanken experiment I want you to consider. What if KPIs could talk with each other, learn from each other? We care about customer lifetime value. What correlation, if any, is there between customer lifetime value and employee experience? What relationship is there between CLV and the EBITDA we want to have? If we improve employee experience and it leads to improved customer lifetime value, what price are we prepared to pay an EBITDA for that? I have no answer for this, but let me tell you what the original sin of legacy organizations are. They siloize the KPIs. Who owns employee experience? CHRO. Who owns customer lifetime value? Oftentimes just marketing and sales. Occasionally customer success. Who owns EBITDA? Altogether now, the finance folks. And what do? They get together every 90 days or 180 days to coordinate. What's the purpose of going through a digital transformation if you're not creating dynamic feedback loops between the way you hold yourself accountable and measure performance? These remarks suggest what I hope you come away with, and this is where I could stop the talk right now. The issue you should be going back to your organizations with, in light of what you've heard on day one thus far, is how do we use digital media mechanisms to make KPIs more valuable? These are the kind of questions I ask in my exec ed classes and workshops, but I kind of want them in the back of your mind as you listen to what follows. What KPIs generate your most useful insights? Which ones generate the biggest conflicts? Which KPIs are literally counterproductive for you? And what novel KPIs should you be considering or exploring in the next 12 to 18 months? Because what I need you to understand is that KPIs shouldn't be just end of pipe. Oh, how are we doing? Let's look at the KPI. No, you want to organize your business processes, your user experiences, and your growth and value creation around the measurements that matter most, that you can digitally instrument, monitor, network, share, and analyze. It's an MIT conference. This is my friend Daryl Morey. He was one of the co-founders of the MIT Sports Analytics event. Very good chapter on him in Michael Lewis's book, The Undoing Project. He, as you may know, was the guy who brought sprawl ball to the NBA with the Houston Rockets. He's now in Philly with the 76ers. And basically, this is a comment that he used. It's a titanic shift. The sports that have applied analytics are all kinds of unrecognizable to what they were before that. You look for the things that drive winning, the metrics and KPIs that drive winning. These are the edges and organizing principles that allow you to improve individual performance and team performance. It's as relevant in the business world as it is in the high-performance sports world. What's one of the things that Darryl did with both the Rockets and the 76ers? Because, don't take my word for this, you can check it out, most players in the NBA know very, very little about statistics. They really are not up for a debate about Bayesian versus frequentist analysis. But they like playing video games. They like, pun intended, digital twins. So one of the ways you introduce spacing concept, play patterns, et cetera, stick it in a video game. That's how coaching is done at the very highest levels of sport today. Digital twins should be seen not just as a way of fine-tuning things, but as a way of gaining insights about what kind of measurements should be prioritized, and should we prioritize these measurements, how do the outcomes measurably change on this? Now, most of you know born digital companies represented here. This is what they do. This is what they grew up with. This is in their forgive me, don't shoot me, don't hiss. This is in their corporate DNA. Amazon, an organization, full disclosure, I've done some work with, metrics define your corporate culture. I care a lot about corporate culture. We're not going to give a corporate culture talk today, but you want to assess what is your organization's KPI or metrics culture? Because I assure you it's Amazon's, I assure you it's Facebook/Meta, I assure you it's TikTok's, okay? And Alibaba's, okay? And I just like this very simple question. Has your customer had a good day today? That's both an ontological and semantic question. Has your client had a good day today? How do you know? How are you instrumenting them? How are you engaging? How relevant is it for you and your user experience or customer experience for them to have had a good day, a good week, a good month, a good quarter? Okay? These are no longer hypothetical questions. These are questions whose answers you probably want to rethink and re-engineer your digital transformation designs around. And the purpose is not just for measurement, it's to get actionable insight. We've already heard that discussed with several of the startups before, but that's the key. It's not just, how are we doing? It's based on how we're doing, what does growth look like? What does margin look like? What does employee experience and customer sat look like? Basically, and this was one of the key collaborative phrases that David and I worked on, your KPIs are your digital strategy. Your digital strategy is your KPIs. Respectfully, and do I mean to sound cynical and insulting with what I'm about to say? Yes, I do. I don't care about your strategic narrative and story. Yeah, human beings, our first speaker said, natural storytellers. Yeah, tell me a story. In terms of actual performance and outcomes, how do we know? What's the measurement? The way of hybridizing this, if you're telling a story, what kind of KPIs, what role do KPIs play as characters and heroes and supporting characters in that story, in that narrative? But this is key. You are welcome to disagree with this, but I just want to warn you, you're wrong to do so. This is where all digital transformations need to go. We talked about the importance of data governance earlier. John Williams zeroed in on that, and this talk I would consider to be an elaboration and complement to many of his points about data in the cloud and the stack. Data governance, how if we get more data does it change decision rights, how we make decisions? How do we know those decisions were good ones? What were the results? As we change how we measure, how does the data need to change? How do we share? How does that sharing need to change? As that sharing changes, what kind of decision rights need to change? We want to push and empower people down in the organization. If we change decision rights, what kind of data access do we need to provide? How do we want to hold people accountable for this? Again, don't siloize these things. This is a virtuous cycle of better data, better decision, better performance. To what end? To what end? This is the trajectory. How do we digitally transform strategic optimization? Is optimizing what matters most strategy? Again, I'm not going to read the definitions for you, but the fact is there is an extraordinarily rich, wealthy, healthy, diverse literature, mathematical and otherwise, around what optimization means. I urge you to begin to look at that and align that with the teleology, your purpose and point of measurement. My call to action is let's create smarter KPIs. Let's make KPIs not just better, but smarter. What are the key performance inputs and outcomes that we want to learn to optimize? We couldn't have that conversation a decade ago. Well, we could at MIT, and we did. But now anybody who has cloud access can have this conversation. And they should be having this conversation. What do we want to learn to optimize? What ingredients, what attributes go into a key performance indicator that if we optimize, guarantee continuous and continual improvement? Now, these were issues that we began studying at Sloan Management Review about 5 years ago. We did a case study sponsored, not surprisingly, by Google. What was one of the most important things we found? A fundamental disconnect between KPIs and senior management perception of KPIs. What we discovered, what we heard, were the key elements of high return on investment in KPI was this. These organizations understood that you used KPIs, North Stars, et cetera, to lead, not just manage the enterprise. They wanted to take a 360-degree holistic view of the customer, the client. That you didn't just aggregate the data and analytics that went into a KPI and it was a smorgasbord and you couldn't pick it apart. You could actually drill down and do, forgive me, principal component analysis for those KPIs, the underlying Paretos for those KPIs. They would socialize those KPIs. They would share trusted data. Let me give you a free $1 million, million euro suggestion. Okay? There were organizations that built Slack channels around their KPIs, and they could monitor what was going on there. And believe you me, that informed senior management decision and context on this. Not the most expensive thing to do. In fact, I'll ask the question, how many of you have Slack channels or a chat, a wiki, a shared space for discussion throughout the enterprise of KPIs? I've got a couple of go and see these people after this talk, but after the panel discussion. Does someone ask, does it make a difference for your organization or not? Yes. Very good. Can I just ask the name of your organization? Bellwing. Bellwing, okay. We'll talk later on that, but that's fantastic, okay? By the way, we usually get a couple of hands. And by the way, that usually leads to the most interesting conversations. Shared trusted KPI data, there's no such thing as 100 KPIs or 50 KPIs, okay? They're metrics, but not key performance indicators. And the last one is KPIs become data sets for machine learning, okay? KPIs can link your move to machine learning and AI. They're KPIs for business strategy, and you have your AI strategy. How do you link it? We call this the big flip. What's the big flip? Instead of KPIs primarily being outputs for human beings making decisions, they're inputs for machines to train them around what kind of optimization means. You will be completely unsurprised that this is what Spotify and Netflix and Google and Amazon already do. Okay, this is old news. Check out their public disclosure blog on Uber. Check out their public disclosure on this. But this is a template. This is a design pattern you should take very seriously. This is why one of the reasons why Google talked to us, the whole notion of people were doing clickbait, because what was their KPI? Click-through rate. Well, what happened? What kind of headlines do you see with click-through rate? Clickbait, okay? The Google Analytics dashboard people said, how do we move people away from the funnel model of click-through to customer lifetime value, getting them to take a longer-term view, because that will lead to different kinds of instrumentation, investment, and longer-term relationships here. There's a wonderful case study in Nature magazine. The link is here. You'll be able to get this. Again, Google AI funded, working with ophthalmologists. Again, not going to read this to you, but this is one of the big problems that people who focus and fixate on KPIs are. They seek to maximize the objective function, but what if the objective function ain't the right one? It's easy for machine learning practitioners to become fixated on an obvious objective, but they could be setting the algorithm up to solve the wrong problem. We should be asking, should this patient see a doctor, not do they have this disease or not? Talk about use case analysis. Talk about user experience. Talk about what quality healthcare really means. So the key disruptive capability is KPIs can learn. KPIs can learn. You need to begin exploring and experimenting with how your data flows and workflows train and inform the KPIs that are the desired outcomes from that. But look where we get to start from. Enterprise KPIs, customer KPIs, ecosystem KPIs, workplace people analytics, and quantified self-personal KPIs. Serious question. Last time I'll ask for a show of hands, but because I see some questions coming in here. Who in your organization owns looking for correlations between these KPI data sets? Is this an active thing? A couple of hands going up. Okay, what do I mean? We have enterprise KPIs. How are they performing? What is the relationship between the enterprise KPIs and our people analytics? Are there correlations? Are there causal mechanisms? We have all of these KPIs gathered by different parts of the enterprise. Who owns looking for patterns of similarity between these KPIs, between silo KPIs? Because that can give us, gee, if we invest more in customer KPIs, and marketing attribution KPIs, it may allow us to segment and focus our customer support or client support differently. The whole notion is of, back to that earlier quote, how do we use ensembles of KPIs to learn what optimization can and should mean? How should we label those KPIs? And we're right back to this discussion again. This is the direction where we're going to go, but increasingly with analytics, with machine learning, with automation and automated systems, RPA, et cetera, we're deconstructing this virtuous cycle of smarter KPIs to figure out where do changes in one lead to outcomes and improvements in the other. And what if we made these KPIs even smarter? And this is something that MIT has a wonderful background in. In my original appointment at MIT was the Media Lab, and Patti Mesa's group was the Software Agents group, and did work with Tom Malone and the Center for Coordination Science, Software Agents. What if KPIs were software agents? Not just a way of tracking things, but software agents that could actually learn, that could actually share information, that could actually cut deals with other KPIs, okay? This is the definition of an intelligent agent, and just in the interest of speed, I'm going to go on. But there is, again, a rich reservoir of existing code in this regard. We talked about GPT-3. You're going to be seeing interesting marriages between DALL-E and GPT-3 and other open source / inner source AI ML resources for, how do we make our KPIs smarter? May not work with all of our KPIs, but these particular KPIs we should do the experiment with. But it's not just managing KPIs singly, they're coalitions, they're collectives. How do we train a bunch, like a basketball team? How do we train a bunch of KPIs to make them complementary and supplementary when they need to be, and competitive when they need to be? How do we know? That's what leadership, that's what management is going to be about. What do you want optimization to mean is going to become one of the most important strategic, operational, organizational, and cultural issues your organization will confront as its digital capabilities expand. And how do you resolve those conflicts? What are the KPIs for the KPIs that help assure that we're maximizing our return on KPI? That's the question. That's the value game. That's the challenge I urge you to consider when you go back to your organizations. How do you manage the trade-offs between customer lifetime value, employee experience, EBITDA? Where do they relate to each other and correlate to each other? Where are they inversely related? Where do they complement and support and create a virtuous cycle between them? Now, will your next algorithm be a boss? If you work at Amazon in a warehouse, the algorithm is your boss. If you work at Uber, the algorithm is your boss. For the people in this room, I don't know. I'll give you 3 to 5 years on that regard. Okay? Will there be dashboards? We saw AR stuff, metaverse. I think the whole notion of instead of just looking at a device, you get to experience measurements differently. I think that's going to be a big deal. That's the kind of stuff you want universities looking at. That's the kind of stuff you should be partnering with MIT on. So my suggested takeaways on this is your KPIs are your strategy is your KPIs. Okay? Your KPIs need to learn for you, from you, and with you. And what new and innovative KPIs do you need come 2023 as your organizations digitally transform? In anticipation of the panel that I'm going to moderate, where we're talking about ESG issues, here's a nice EP. I just wanted to cover my bets with Lonely Polar Bear and Smokestacks here. What's the most important KPI? That your organization reduce its carbon footprint, or that your organization reduces the carbon footprints of its key customers and clients? Is it okay to raise your own carbon footprint if you reduce that dramatically of your customers? That may be a question I'll ask the gentleman from Schneider Electric when he's on the panel. Okay? So my view is going forward, your smartest KPIs should optimize your strategy, and your optimal strategy is smarter KPIs. If you are not able to explore this philosophy, you don't have to embrace it, but if you are not able to explore this philosophy after investing in your digital transformation as a product and a byproduct of investing in your digital transformation, I suggest you're managing your digital transformation in a non-optimal way. Those are my remarks. That's my email. I look forward to the questions here, and I hope I'm not too wildly over time.
Not at all.
Okay.
Thank you for this inspiring presentation, Mike. And we got a couple of questions here on the screen for you.
I love this question, and I love this question particularly because I appreciate the meta-irony of it being submitted anonymously. I'm actually, one of my side hustles is a startup that is addressing some of these issues. There is first and foremost, this is a cultural issue. My view is if your employees, particularly in a day of hybrid work, remote work, et cetera, there's two paths. One is informed consent. You should never be doing anything that your employees don't agree with and acknowledge explicitly. So the literature in the medical community about informed consent is one that you should be looking at in terms of, quote unquote, monitoring workplace productivity. But that's not good enough. The real challenge, and this is what we're working on, and there's some very good startup organizations, Humanize, et cetera, that are looking at this, is how can employee monitoring be done in a way that empowers the individual employee, that it becomes part of a collaboration? Do you have a culture of trust and mutual respect that allows that? What experiments could you invite some of your employees to participate in to demonstrate as a use case that, in fact, the benefits of data for organizational empowerment and individual empowerment outweigh the risks of altogether now, the panopticon and surveillance? So the issue is it can't be a culture of workplace surveillance. It's how does monitoring facilitate individual empowerment? And the proof is in the pudding comes when we will forego this kind of monitoring because we can't make an authentic, honorable, credible, measurable case that it will empower the employee, the team leader. Next question. What, for driving a winning, well, I would need to know what kind of an organization. Daryl Morey could give you an answer to that question. This is one of those questions that, on the surface looks interesting, but in fact raises more questions, which is, what does winning look like for the organization? Does winning look like maximizing shareholder value? I'll say, without embarrassing anybody, the answer to that question when you talk to a PE, private equity company, is, does it enable us to flip the property, in the period of time we want to sell it at the maximum price? And demonstrate that we are a good steward and value creator for that regard. So the issue is, what does winning mean? Now, there's a very good literature on the notion of North Star KPIs and KPI portfolios. What do you think would benefit your organization more? A better understood single North Star KPI, NPS, combined with related to EBITDA or something? That's the kind of issue. Are we managing a portfolio, or are we managing one or two key things more? And is that a function of where we are in the life cycle, or are there other variables associated with that? The way you define KPI, okay, I get asked this question a lot. There's also very good work on OKRs, objective key results. I view them as siblings. What's the objective? What are the key results? That's what you ask a team to do. Here's the objective for the team. Here are the key results that we're looking for. But what are the underlying things, depending upon how you instrument, how you track, how you analyze? What is the way you have a key performance indicator? CLV, okay, customer lifetime value. I do not know, and I'm sure somebody's done a thesis on it, I do not know how you would do customer lifetime value as an OKR, okay? I see that as a dynamic process, ongoing process, where the more you learn about your customers and suppliers and ecosystem, the better able you are to grow customer lifetime value over time. Similarly, EBITDA. I don't know how you do EBITDA as an OKR. I see certain quarterly goals in that regard, but in terms of how EBITDA relates to customer lifetime value and employee experience, I need those KPIs to talk with one another, to learn from one another, to cut deals with one another. And I need the people who own those KPIs to understand the conversation that's going on, to intelligently mediate and arbitrate the conversation that's going on. Next, what are the best practices to generate soft? I don't know what soft means. You mean soft like non-financial? Okay, well that's biased right there. Okay, that is something I would like to see more research on, because there's an interesting thing that we've observed, what are called emergent KPIs. You're looking at a lot of data and you suddenly discover interesting correlations, that there are some teams, by the way, one of the most interesting things, and this is a pure analytic thing and it ties into the earlier monitoring test. So when I was doing advisory work during the height of the pandemic, there were a couple of large banks, financial service companies who shall remain nameless. They were very concerned about remote work. We began overlaying SNA, social network analytics. Were there key people? What were the hubs and spokes? And the emerging, should somebody who was an expert, a subject matter expert, should they have more communication? Should they be publishing? Should they be posting? So these would be soft things. These are things that you discover as you monitor the workflows and data flows on this, as you measure how frequently people engage or interact. Not just people as people, but the artifacts that people generate, the reports that they do, the presentations that they do. So I would categorize this as, what are the emergent KPIs that emerge between human-to-human interactions that might give you a way to leverage things, or the way that certain groups of people interact with their GitHub or GitLab repository. Are those teams more, quote-unquote, productive or agile or responsive or not? So that's the way I'm going to choose to answer the question, but it also ties into, how do you want your KPIs to learn? How do you want them to learn to get better? Okay. Sometimes it's relatively easy, but the difficulty is yeah, what's the first thing they teach in computer science? It ain't hello world, it's garbage in, garbage out. Okay? This is actually a great thing to end with, because it's not about the data. It's about how you got the data. It's the way you measured things. I mentioned employee experience. Does anybody in this room believe that there is a professional consensus around what qualifies or constitutes good employee experience? Customer lifetime value. I can show you 8 or 9 equations around customer lifetime value, and goes right back to my first debate. Should customer lifetime monetization be more important than customer lifetime value? Okay? So to me, the issue is, the more seriously you take data lineage and data quality, and to go back to Mr. Sullivan, data governance, the more seriously you have to take measurement-driven digital transformation as an initiative. I think that'll be it. Thank you again for your time and question, and I hope we'll save those things, because I want to see more.